Welcome to this panel. I think this is one of the most important panels at the conference this week, in that there is a lot of buzz in the public markets about esports. A lot of people looking for somewhere to put their money that's been pulled out of things like cannabis. But the question of where the money is all-encompassing. I'm going to open up with that one question for each of you. You're from 3 different verticals. They're all important in the grand scheme of things, but from your perspectives, where is the money in esports?
I think the evolution of video gaming from the original Chinese model in freemium games and microtransaction in-game purchases is that evolution of video game. That's where the revenue capture is for all the developers. Before, on the console market, in particular in North America, you would go to EB Games, buy a video game for $79.99, play it on your console, and that's the revenue capture for the company, that one single payment or opening weekend. Now, people on average are spending $4 per transaction per day, and at the end of the month, it comes up to quite a significant number. Everyone quantifies it, it's just a Starbucks coffee, but at the end of the month, you're spending $200, and you're doing that continuously month over month. So you can see the abstract revenue generation now for companies that have freemium models. So in short, I think micro transactions and in-game purchases is where the revenue is going to be coming from.
I can personally affirm to that. My 10-year-old and my 13-year-old managed to spend $6,000 on my credit card on microtransactions.
What's that on an annualized basis?
Over 4 months. So on an annualized basis, we're looking at broke.
Could have easily been 10,000.
Yeah, if I wasn't checking my statement, it would have been by now. Pepper, where do we stand on money on the tournament side?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about where's the money, microtransactions and that element are going to be a recurring theme and topic. One thing we've seen change, I think, for those of us that are gamers, as we saw, the way that we buy and interact with games has changed. Rather than paying, that $70, $80 and then repurchasing every year, the model has switched towards what I would consider a gaming experience. You're purchasing essentially almost a subscription to a game. Essentially, you buy the game, and then within that game, you're able to augment your experience. And what's really interesting about that, I think, from a money perspective, is that when a game is priced on the shelf, well, everyone's paying the same amount, regardless of how much you actually want to augment your experience. It's a set price. Now the entry-level point for games is significantly lower, and players essentially have the choice on how much they want to augment their experience in games. So do they want to stick at that free level or the $5 level, or do they want to pay to advance faster or through cosmetic upgrades in game? It's up to them. It's their choice. So it's a lot more flexibility to the player. And when we talk more about Pepper from a tournament standpoint, we're trying to add layers on top of that again and say, right, as a gamer, how do we augment your experience as a gamer? But it's your choice. You don't have to participate, but we're providing you a way to continue to augment that experience.
Charles, from the team perspective?
Yeah, just to add to that, like one of the biggest factors of revenue coming into esports is really content and original content and streaming. So what I'm alluding to is viewership, and that's viewership that's on Twitch and on your social medias, and that's such a big part of what we're doing here at Tidal Gaming, and obviously down to our esports vertical with Lazarus Esports. So once again, it's our professional players, it's our content developers, it's our entire organization as a whole. Viewership is a big revenue driver in the esports industry, and that follows content that you're producing on OTT networks and obviously on the Twitch platform as well. So that's the biggest contributing factor, and one of the biggest contributing factors to our business model and obviously our success and organic growth moving forward. And on top of that, it would also be traditional sports sponsorship and digital sponsorship as well. So that's rights and naming rights to and logo placement and jersey placement for non-endemic sponsors coming into the space or partners that are already in the space.
So esports has a reputation of having grown very quickly, but blockchain also had that, and marijuana's had that. And cobalt and lithium had that at one point. How do we wrestle esports down to a place where we know exactly what it's going to look like in 2, 3, 5 years' time? Like right now, it's everything everywhere. there's a million tournaments, there's a million teams, there's a million leagues, but only really Dota and League of Legends are really penetrating globally in a big way. So as a game developer, what are the risks for you as you're looking to join those two giants?
To answer your first question, I think where we see esports going, because it's fragmented right now based on particular video games. I mean, there are multiple infrastructures that allow you to compete against other players in specific games, but I think in 3 to 5 years' time, I think the unification of all the platforms together, so basically you get one social status or one credit status, you get your player card, so to speak, over across all platforms on all the video games that you have played. I think that's what we're going to see, and I think moving forward, in terms of more revenue generation, I think that's where the advertising dollars are going to go. We romanticize some of the athletes in pro sports like hockey, like football, but we're only beginning to attribute that sort of clout and celebrity status to esports gamers. And I think once there is that unification, let's say player A has done this in Fortnite, or has done this in PUBG, or this in Dota, being able to now bring up his player card and see like, wow, he's really diversified in the way he plays video games, but he's also very good at multiple avenues. So I think moving forward, that's where we'll see esports. As a video game developer, what we have to focus on and how we focus on it is keeping up with the trends, giving players what they want. We have one main video game that is the flagship of our company. It's an 800 man-year video game that's been launched on Tencent's WeGame platform in China. We have a portfolio of 9 other video games that are purpose-built for esports. And the majority of the ideas that we generate for all these other 9 mobile and PC games is from our school. We have a night vocational academy based for video game developers in Shanghai at our HQ. We have a 5-story building. The first 4 stories house 400 of our developers. The 5th is the video game school. We get over 30,000 applicants every single semester. It's a semester, year-long program. At the end of the year, the judgment criteria and how we want students to actually come to the school and why we want them is not only for their clout, because they're all mathematicians, they're all engineers, but in essence, because they're video game players and developers, they're artists. We want to take not only their artistic ability and apply that to something that we can generate revenue from, but also we want their ideas. In essence, they are our target market. So really, from a game developer's point of view, it's managing trends and kind of staying in front of the trends and understanding which game types are most popular and which game types are trending, and be able to provide some sort of supply, some sort of video game to that demand is a prime focus for us. And we do that through incubating ideas and people, and then giving them jobs after to the top 3%, giving jobs in the studio from the game studio. So,
on the tournament side, obviously the game developers own their IP. And so Pepper's business model is to create a platform to allow individuals to run their own tournaments, if I'm correct. How do you penetrate to a higher level to where the real big money is?
Yeah, good question. And just to talk to the Pepper platform, so we actually operate all of the tournaments. So part of the idea is removing as many barriers to entry and friction into the tournament environment. We want to enable. Essentially Pepper is an esports tournament platform for casual gamers. So we don't want to change how people game. We want to elevate that experience. And ultimately, the trajectory for Pepper is to, from the game publisher standpoint, is to help those game publishers sell more games, get more exposure. If we're able to truly elevate and improve that gaming experience, gamers can be more engaged with the titles that they're playing, and ultimately that's what the publishers want to see is both new sales and retention. And the way that we do that with Pepper is we don't want to disrupt that existing gaming process. Most tournament platforms are requiring you to pre-register for a tournament, and then you start at a specific time, 5 p.m. on a Thursday with your team, and then you play for 4 hours and see if you've won the tournament or not. The way that we've developed Pepper is by working directly with the data that the game publishers make available. Once you've registered, you just connect your gaming account play as many games or as few games as you want during the week on whatever schedule you want to play, and we're able to track that data. And your in-game performance versus your skill level is what counts in that tournament versus other players that are in it. And what that means is that there's very little friction. If someone plays 2 hours a night on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and someone else likes to play a full day on Wednesday, they can be in the same tournament. We're not changing how they play the game, how they experience the game. We're adding something on top. And that, why I think that's important is when the publishers are looking at how to drive retention and revenue and increase sales in their games, it's very important that they're not disrupting that gaming experience. They don't want to necessarily change how players are trying to force them down certain directions. Pepper, we want to give everyone exposure to esports, the ability to play more competitively, and our strategy is to do that in a way that doesn't change how they currently interact with their games. I think from a revenue perspective, that's very important as well. It needs to be a kind of continually increasing that value.
So you're not trying to move the tide, you're going with the tide. You're adding an overlay to what's already been created.
Yeah, that's a much better way of putting it than I did, exactly. Thank you.
I'm a word guy. From the team's perspective, the problem that I have with a lot of companies that are out there in that side of the market is I can pick this guy, and this guy tomorrow, and we can set up a team and we can start playing Rocket League and tell ourselves that we're going to get to the championship. You've actually set up teams in the past that have elevated in a big way in multiple esports. What's the difference between what happens when you decide to start a team in a given game and what happens when I decide to start a team?
The biggest competitive advantage to that, Chris, is the fact that we've been doing this for close to a decade now, and so it's really just that industry experience and the relationships that we've developed over that time that allows us to go back and just to echo what some of my fellow panelists had said here is that it's really understanding and focusing on the trends and forecasting and analysis and understand like the emerging games that are coming available and the mainstream games that are just about to take off or have a next infusion of prize pools like $250 million for Fortnite in 2019. So once again, the difference between you setting one up and us setting one up is frankly, once again, we've been in the industry for so long that we're more strategic with how we can utilize our capital and where to put that and ultimately how to drive revenue back to our teams.
I'm still setting up a team. Screw you. On the video game development side, there's a long history of $100 million games that have floated through the universe for 2 weeks and then disappeared, never to be heard from again. Kickstarter. As a developer, you have a lot of games going at once, but there are a lot of indies out there that will spend a year and a half trying to develop one game, scratching around for coin, put it out there, and the universe just doesn't pick up on it. Like, what is the real risk for you, even if you're developing 9 games at a time, that the resources you're putting in mean no resources back?
6 years, $65 million, 400 developers. That's our input cost. Compare that, that's in China, in our HQ.
That's pretty cheap.
It's pretty cheap.
That's like a 4-man shop in Toronto.
4? Really?
Well,
To compare those prices, based on man years spent, 800 on our video game Rising Fire, North American market, that's a $250 million game. So why I think our game will be successful is because we started this company in 2006, private company, from all ex-private equity guys really love video gaming. And they saw that because of the change in the allocation of broadband internet in China in particular, that video gaming was going to soar in popularity. We started in 2006 as a joint venture partner to Epic Games. Now, everybody knows Epic Games right now because they are the creators of Fortnite. As part of the joint venture, we were the outsourced partner providing content to the point where we actually built 40% of Fortnite in our studio in Shanghai. We also worked on Gears of War and a few other titles that Epic popularized globally. So in terms of experience, I think that we are very competitive, not only because of the price or the lack thereof that it costs us to make these video games, but we have firsthand experience in building video games on the Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is a very popular back-end infrastructure for that Epic licenses out to other companies to build video games. Our engineers spent so many years developing games for Epic that in 2011 we figured that we want to, go out on our own and build our own games. So we built Mars. Mars took us $3.6 million to make, and year to date has generated $65 million. P&L looks great, but because we're in the largest video game market in the world, it's a failure. It's a failure because we didn't have distribution. It was downloaded 23 million times globally. Based on those numbers and the average price per download, we should have been $400, $500 million in terms of revenue generation. And we got 65 year to date in 8 years. Distribution was the issue. We fixed that by partnering with Tencent on our new game, Rising Fire, that's currently in the market. And Tencent is taking care of distribution. Then again, the real risk, it could not hit. I can tell you what Tencent has done in the 2 years and 4 levels of testing and the multiple patch updates that we have to deliver to them every 6 weeks. So in terms of success rate, Tencent is one of the best in the industry, but there's always a chance that it doesn't hit. I mean, case in point, you just mentioned it. So yeah, we're maybe not a $100 million game in China, but we're definitely double that in North America. So I think we're on the right track with basically because of our distribution partner and our experience already making video games. So to echo what Tyler said, it's experience and understanding the industry from its very finite pieces and then extrapolating out there and catching these trends.
Tyler, if I'm going to put on my journalist hat, if I look at the NFL, there's one league that everyone watches, but there's a lot of other leagues underneath. There's arena football, there's college football, there's rec football. On the esports side, you're not the NFL. Are you arena? Are you rec football? Where do you fit? And is there enough there for you to turn that into $1 billion enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be bigger than the NFL. Obviously, that's our goal. But in all seriousness, it's important actually to look at it. There is a bit of a differentiator when we look at the gaming space, and most platforms out there in the same instance that and we can talk about this in the sports analogy as well. They're catering to those professional sportsmen. There's no amateurs playing in the NFL. And most tournament platforms that exist today are catered towards the 200 million esports players that are out there. These are players that are trying to make money playing esports. They're trying to win tournaments for compensation. Now, the frustrations that I've experienced with gaming, that people that I play have experienced is, I'm under no illusion that I could become a professional esports player. I put that dream to bed a long time ago. But I enjoy playing competitively. I want to participate. I want to have that tournament experience. And what I found is, going back to our discussion earlier, most of the tournament platforms that are out there don't allow me to do that. They try and put me in a position which is, there's a lot of friction unless you're driven to become a professional esports player. If that's the path you want, then there's a lot of platforms out there that can take you through that. But I just want to be able to jump into a game every now and again, but be part of a tournament, feel like I'm part of that competition. And, so 200 million esports players, there's 3 billion gamers in the world. And so for us, that's the target market that we're going after, is those 3 billion gamers that, want to, they're casual gamers, they want a game on a casual basis, but every now and again they want to, put a little bit more on the line. They want to have a little bit of, competitive edge with their friends, with the guys that they play with. So really, it's for us, our goal is to elevate the experience for those casual gamers. We're not going after those professional esports players. We want every gamer that's participating and interacting with Pepper to be thinking, they have the chance to have that esports experience. They could be up on stage in front of thousands of people, not because they think they can win, but because they can have that experience of being part of that esports e-gaming space.
How do you take money from them to do that?
So from a revenue standpoint, right now, we just launched our alpha. Pepper is free to enter. Our revenue streams are focused around working with game publishers, sponsors, advertisers. A great advertising process for tournament platforms is sponsored tournaments. Especially for the younger generation, they're less responsive to direct advertising. They don't like clicking on adverts. But if there's something for them, they're much more engaged. And the obvious ones are companies like Corsair, Logitech that can sponsor tournaments. But I saw one the other day, which was Domino's Pizza sponsoring a tournament. This is another platform I saw, which is great. Who doesn't want to? If they already game and now one click they're in a tournament and they could win a month of free pizza. And they're much more engaged with the brand, right? So, there's a number of other revenue streams that we're exploring, but essentially, it's engaging with the players and providing an avenue for publishers and sponsors to be more engaged directly as well.
Charles, I watched the Rocket League World Showdown on the weekend, and the day before that event happened, one of the top teams changed their roster. One player goes to another team, which then has to move a player to another team. And it struck me that we're putting a lot of money in the hands of 15-year-olds who can be a little bit dramatic and a little bit impetuous and don't necessarily care if you have a contract. As a team owner who's putting resources into those kids, how hard is it for you to actually keep control of those kids and build a long-term team with an engaged roster?
There's sometimes, there's certain games that sometimes we do dip below, like the under 18 market, and Rocket League is one of those titles for sure, and we have had a pro Rocket League team in the past, and I always encourage to get involved with the parents. So when we, one of our first players on Rocket League was 16, one was 17, and another one was 18. And it was just like a multiple point conversation of really talking with the kids, working through the contract, speaking with the parents, educating them about the space, where the space is going, what their potential success is, and that this is a legitimate business for them, where 5 years ago or 10 years ago it wasn't. So nowadays, you're seeing individuals and kids nowadays that are playing Fortnite and Rocket League and making tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in a weekend. And so once again, it's always an educational process, but to mitigate some of that risk as well, Chris, is the fact that you want to scout players. You want to, if you're making a roster change before an event, it's not unlike any traditional sports team, like the Toronto Maple Leafs or anybody else, where you're constantly evaluating your team at every given moment. And if there's an opportunity for your team to be better, and once again, you have that direct line of communication with your team and your coaches and your analysts and your scouting team and your general manager, you have all of those voices and all that communication that allows you to make an informed decision, which then obviously mitigates your risk from a team ownership point of view. So there are certain times where you might have to make a drastic or what might seem as a drastic decision, changing out a roster player right before an event. But once again, when you're like Tidal Gaming and you've been in the industry for so long and you surround yourself with great people and you have the right infrastructure and you have the right management, that's what allows you to be smart with your decisions and not be reactive, but be proactive for ultimately your ultimate success.
Rocket League is one game where the players are the ones that are invited to the championships based on previous form, not necessarily the teams. So as a team owner in that particular game, you can put all the work into getting them there, but then they can decide next year, we're just going to change the name and be our own team. Is that restricted to Rocket League, or is that the sort of thing that will also show up in CSGO or Fortnite or any of the other?
Yeah, that's a very rare thing though, Chris, where once again, most developers and publishers, they want tier one organizations like Tidal and our esports platform, which is Lazarus Esports. They want that name because that's only promoting their game. It's creating more viewership. It's organically growing on social media so that it's not just one player, that's one kid that's not affiliated or partnered or sponsored. The developers and publishers of these games and the event hosts want the best teams. They want the best players. That ultimately is going to lead to revenue and viewership as well. So it is important that, sometimes they can switch things on us, but once again, it's understanding and having that direct line communication. And sometimes, once again, we've been in this industry for so long. We've been in it for close to a decade now. And once again, we get a lot of privy information from developers, and that's just building great relationships over that decade. So we, every team's a little bit different, but I think if you have that great communication and that information line with developers and event hosts, you can you can circumnavigate that.
Just quickly on the financial side, what does it look like for you as a game developer in terms of upfront costs so upfront revenues on your games as opposed to microtransactions? What's the split?
So currently, the video game is free to play, free to download, and microtransactions start immediately thereafter. I mean, there's a large body of research that's going into when is the best time to apply advertising towards getting people to actually purchase things within your game. And you can argue that there's a transparency effect because you're not giving up a physical currency to actually buy something. And then there's the whole concept of microtransactions and why they have grown in popularity. Going back to the online gambling world, is that playing video games depletes the levels in your brain of how to control yourself or how to prevent yourself.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a real thing. So that depletion leads to your buoyancy levels in your brain to prevent you from making stupid decisions. And it comes to crosshairs where basically the advertisers know exactly at what point in the video game, after you do something really awesome, you beat the level, you kill a boss, or if you lose really bad and you're really upset about it, and then the game, because of data analytics, is tracking how many times you've attempted to kill someone or how many times you've attempted a certain task. And at that point where you're at your weakest or at your highest, they will advertise something that you actually do want to buy based on your play habits and based on how much time you've put into it.
Man, this is arch villain shit, isn't it?
And you know what?
This is like I'm scared for my children all of a sudden.
I don't want to game anymore. I'm like, this is scary.
Yeah, it's scary, and
It's profitable though.
It's profitable, but the scarier thing, or if you look at it from the other side, the positive thing about this is that there is a lot of research going into it, and as of now, the video game industry on the microtransaction side is not overly regulated, which is why you see Fortnite making $5 billion, which is why you see PUBG coming close to that, which is why you see all these. I'll tell you something. I was doing some research for a last presentation that I did, and I went through and I scoured the internet, and I wanted to find the top 5 opening box office movie hits and compare them to video games. Well, the list that kept coming up is now, of the top 5, let's go to top 3. The top 3 box office movie openings the top 2 aren't even movies, they're video games. Now what Hollywood has done is that they've merged video games with movies and now call them entertainment opening weekends. The top 2 are video games. Number 1 is Grand Theft Auto 5 in opening weekend, and there's some controversy because it was released on a Tuesday and not a Friday. Regardless, over $1 billion opening weekend. Second game was the one that was released in Q4 of last year, and it was Red Dead Redemption 2, $728 million in opening weekend. The first movie doesn't appear until the 3rd spot, and that was the Avengers movie, and that generated $620 million. So you can see how much money is being derived from microtransactions. I kind of went off on a tangent. I forgot the question. Was there one?
You've shattered all my dreams.
Sorry.
Just to qualify that, I bought both those games on those opening weekends as well.
as did I.
Me too.
I was really surprised. I just want to go sort of quickly lightning round style for the whole panel on a couple of questions because we're running out of time and there's so much to ask. I want to talk briefly about academics. You've obviously opened up your own academy to bring people straight in, but on the US side, there's a lot of colleges that have their own teams, a lot of leagues that are devoted to college teams. How does the academic system fit into this? Answers on a postage stamp.
Scholarships, full ride scholarships at major universities for eSports athletes. Instead of Kumon or extra math and spelling help in elementary, middle, and high school, parents are now getting their kids extra help for Fortnite and PUBG so that they're now more popular at school.
I can tell you, my kid was bullied at school. Used to play Minecraft. As a 7-year-old, I said to him, yeah, I'll let you play as much Minecraft as you want if you start your own server. And you learn how to do it and you get a little bit of knowledge while you're playing. Man, he had every kid in school on that server and was the king of the castle. Completely changed his social status. Just quickly, finances on the team side. Realistically, there's a lot of talk about sponsorships making up money on all platforms. What's the reality of sponsorships as an income source for teams?
Yeah, for sponsorships, like there's great success in that right now, and we've seen that just over the last year, let alone moving forward. And once again, there's a tremendous amount of sponsors and partners within the space, and then a lot of non-endemic. So you look at like your Audis, your Mercedes-Benz, your Snickers, your Coca-Colas, and they've all, Nike just came into the space as well for like $441 million. And once again, you're starting to see a huge amount of non-endemics coming into the space because they're realizing the opportunity. They're seeing the demographic. They understand that this is an underserved market, and once again, there's
are they coming to the teams to spend that money, or are they spending that money on the platforms or on individual?
It's a combination
streamers?
of all. It's the organizations, it's the teams, it's the players, it's the events, and it's no matter where that money comes in, it's a trickle down effect, and it does come to us as well. So at the end of the day, it is direct line to us, but if it comes from the top and floats down to Lazarus and Tidal Gaming, that's ultimately how it happens.
On the sponsorship side, there's a lot of companies that will say we will get revenue from sponsorships, but actually getting into the boardrooms and the advertising agencies of those big companies is difficult. How do you foresee penetrating that sponsorship market?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, as I know we're right in time here, but we're not looking at it from a big publisher standpoint or traditional game standpoint. We're working with traditional advertisers and traditional publishers. So ultimately, we're broadening our horizons of who we can target.
Thank you very much, guys. If anyone wants to get more information on these three companies, they're floating around the floor. I recommend it. They are all doing really interesting things in really interesting areas, and they are not one of the many bullshit players that are in the esports space.
Thank you
Appreciate
very much,
it, guys.
Chris.